Wow, the iPhone 16 Pro Max with brand new cameras, larger sensor. Now everyone has pro level features right in their pocket. Probably don't need any of this anymore, right? Might as well get rid of it all. So my iPhone 12 Pro Max finally died on me. Well, it didn't technically die. The main camera got smashed in because I dropped it so many times over the years. Had it for about 5 years, so it's had a pretty good run. And I don't normally buy every single phone that comes out every single year. So I normally give it sort of 4 to 5 years before I upgrade. So it's a really good time to upgrade to the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now this has a whole load of new features, has brand new cameras, has larger sensor. The thing that really intrigues me the most is the way that Apple, and this applies to all smartphone manufacturers, LG, Samsung, etc., is the way that they've marketed their camera systems and the lenses on their smartphones to be pro level. I'm just looking through the official specification of the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and the spec of the camera or the camera system is quite extensive. I'm not sure what a lot of this is. Most of the camera specification is actually software or it's computational photography processes. Without these computational techniques, smartphone imaging capabilities would be much lower. This list is full of jargon and words that kind of sound more exciting than they actually are, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video. Personally, I've never seen a photo or a video taken with an iPhone, or any smartphone for that matter, that I thought was better than a real camera or video camera. Now, don't get me wrong, the iPhone has been a technological revelation and I'd be lost without it. I use it all the time for various things, but I would never use it for commercial or professional work. Generally, I think smartphone photos are absolute garbage in comparison to full frame or even micro four thirds cameras, and have been since the first iPhone was released. I've travelled across Southern Africa and the Far East with my micro four thirds Lumix gear and really enjoyed using the GH5 and G9 cameras. I was able to pack 3 to 4 lenses and 2 cameras into a small carry-on size bag while also keeping the overall weight to around 7 kilograms. That's certainly something worth thinking about if you're travelling frequently. The quality from the micro four thirds sensor is far better than that of any smartphone, and the lenses are small, relatively cheap and extremely lightweight, which makes it a very portable camera system. However, there are many factors to consider and it really does depend on what you're photographing. I'm quite often shooting professional sports. I shoot a lot of wildlife, landscapes, also real estate, interiors and exteriors. I also do a lot of drone photography and videography. The power of a full frame sensor and its light gathering capabilities, along with a fast and wide aperture lens with professional coatings and optical stabilizations, etc., will always outperform smartphones, regardless of their often misleading marketing. And don't get me started on all the fanboys, iPhone content creators, TikTok and Instagram influencers. Some of this content is very good, and with good light and composition, etc., you can achieve some really good results. But to claim smartphones have pro level equipment, to me, is highly misleading. I'm currently using the Canon R5, I have the R6 and also the R3 cameras, along with the RF 15 to 35, 28 to 70 and 70 to 200mm lenses. Occasionally I use the 100 to 500 and also the 400mm f2.8 for more serious or professional work. For sports, I'm shooting at shutter speeds up to 1/1000th of a second or even 1/2000th of a second. If the light allows me, I'll be shooting at much higher speeds like 1/4000th of a second. That's of course if I'm able to, in order to freeze the action for super sharp and detailed shots. I also have autofocus settings that can be customized for various different subjects. There is not a single smartphone on the market right now that can compete with any of this gear. Even my Lumix G9 with 100 to 400 and 8 to 18mm lenses can produce some really incredible imagery. Now the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max has a 48 megapixel 24mm lens with the ability to zoom digitally to 28 and 35mm. That means you're actually losing resolution when you zoom in. There is also an ultra-wide 13mm equivalent lens at 48 megapixels, which actually beats my 15mm lens for field of view. And there is also a 12 megapixel telephoto lens at 48mm focal range and a 12 megapixel telephoto lens at 120mm, both with sensor shift optical image stabilization and autofocus. There is also a digital zoom up to 25 times. I've no idea why you'd even want to bother using that. You're never ever going to get decent usable results with a 25 times digital zoom lens. Even if the iPhone 16 sensor is 48 megapixels, if those pixels aren't good quality in terms of light gathering capabilities and noise control, then there really is no point in having so many megapixels. The file sizes are much higher for no actual reason. There is no real benefit. you're not going to have a better image because of more pixels. There is also a whole load of computational and optical correction software running for certain modes, such as portrait, where the software will artificially blur the background out to make it appear to have a shallow depth of field, similar to what an f1.2 or 1.4 full frame lens would do. This type of effect simply would never be possible to achieve when using a camera with a small sensor and lens like the ones used on smartphone cameras. It's basically physics that we're talking about. Smartphones replicate the laws of physics, while real cameras and lenses are harnessing the laws of physics. That's all your smartphone is doing. It's basically creating fake computational imagery. And now we have the ability to use or incorporate AI features automatically into every photo we take, means that anyone has access to an extremely powerful, but also extremely dangerous set of tools. But saying that, I'm also able to shoot, edit, and manipulate all the photos I take using real cameras with the same, if not better, AI features with probably even more powerful editing software. The difference is the speed at which it can now be done and uploaded and distributed to the web. That's quite scary. Now, I'd admit some of these features are quite amazing to have in a phone, especially packed into this relatively small frame. To have all those focal ranges covered at 13mm to 120mm is quite astonishing. But is it really providing me with professional level results? But what does it mean to be professional? The definition of professional is a person competent or skilled in a particular activity. Being a professional photographer or videographer requires a lot of skill and knowledge, understanding the equipment and technical expertise. Smartphone cameras are generally in auto mode, and therefore users don't really require any technical skill or knowledge. Just press a button. Now, this is not an anti-Apple video. I've bought many Apple products over the years, and on the most part, I've been extremely satisfied with those products. I'm even an Apple shareholder, which is a fairly decent investment, I have to be honest, despite the measly dividend. This is more about the use of the term professional to market their smartphone cameras. Let's test it out against the gear I'm almost always using and will continue to use regardless of the addition of this technological masterpiece. Firstly, I'm going to take a few landscape shots using the 13mm ultra-wide lens on the iPhone 16. I'm also going to test the 63 megapixel panoramic shooting mode in Apple Pro RAW. I'm going to do the same using my Canon R5 and the RF 15 to 35mm lens. Now, the iPhone has already beaten the RF 15 to 35 with its extra 2mm field of view. But for me, I'm not sure that really matters, as I can just stand back a little further and I can get the same shot. The R5 doesn't have a panoramic function like the iPhone 16, but what I tend to do is flip the camera up in portrait mode and take a sequence of photos that will later be stitched together in post-production. I would normally use the Camera Raw software with Photoshop, process the photos, and it's a relatively quick and simple process and produces great results. For more extreme photography, I'm relying on the burst mode and autofocus features of the iPhone 16 to help capture and freeze the action in front of me. Normally, for high action professional sports, I'm using the R3, the R5, or the R6 cameras with the 70 to 200, 28 to 70, and also the RF 400mm f2.8 lenses. This is around $17,000 worth of gear compared to the $1,200 for the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, when a manufacturer starts boasting about offering pro level lenses, for me, this is what I consider to be pro level. I'm sure there are many people thinking this is not really a fair comparison, and you'd be absolutely right, but Apple are stating their cameras and lenses offer pro level quality. And I'm just trying to show you what is actually pro level quality. But of course, you can make your own mind up. As you can see, there's really no comparison between professional quality lenses and smartphones. The images coming out of the R3 with the 400mm f2.8 lens are sharp, detailed, they're bright, and most importantly, they're in focus, thanks to the insane eye detection autofocus capabilities. And I'm also cropping in on my subject in post-production, so therefore I'm losing pixels. The R3 has a 24 megapixel sensor, and I'm sometimes cropping in and losing 50% of the original image, but the photos are still incredibly high quality, proving that more megapixels do not produce better photos. What the iPhone 16 has is amazing for its size and portability, and the technology is genuinely impressive, but definitely not professional quality. Let's take a look at the 120mm telephoto option on the iPhone 16. Amazing to have that level of reach in your pocket, and compared to the overall size and weight of my 70 to 200 lens, or even the 400mm lens, there really is no comparison. But these are true f2.8 constant aperture lenses. The iPhone 16 has a camera that states it's an f1.78 lens at 24mm equivalent focal range, but in reality it's actually more like an f9 compared to full frame. That's because of the 48 megapixel Sony IMX903 sensor, which is 1/1.14 inch. That's smaller than a 1 inch sensor and is a fraction of the size of a 35mm full frame sensor. An f2.8 lens on a full frame sensor would be considered a professional level lens and is capable of allowing me to shoot at night under floodlights and allows me to maintain a fast shutter speed to freeze the action. My camera will be set to auto ISO, but I'm generally happy with the results up to 10,000 ISO, sometimes beyond that, especially with the R3 camera. It also allows me to utilize other features such as anti-flicker shooting for when shooting under difficult lighting situations such as floodlights. I doubt smartphone cameras will ever be able to match this level of technology. When you look at a photo and think, that looks amazing, it could be because of a number of things, but most often it'll be because of the aperture. And being able to control the aperture allows us to use the camera and lens to create different depth of field effects. For example, when you look at a photo and it's really sharp from corner to corner without the need for post-production, that's because of aperture. Setting the camera to shoot at around f8 to f13 will create a greater depth of field, meaning more of your subject will be in focus. Now let's go in the other direction and set the camera to shoot at f2.8. We're now able to create a photo with a much shallower depth of field, meaning more of our scene is blurred out, except for what we have focused on. It's when people say things like, "Wow, that really pops," it's normally because of the depth of field that full frame sensors produce. This can't be replicated on smartphone cameras because of the size of the sensor. This effect has to be created artificially using computational algorithms and AI. In my experience of using portrait mode with the iPhone, some of the photos look really nice and you can achieve some really good images, but there's usually some sort of anomaly, usually in the background or around subjects. Something just doesn't look right. That's because the iPhone software is basically having to guess how the subject and the background should be separated. It does an amazing job most of the time, but a real camera simply captures what's seen through the lens and nothing else. No algorithms or computational processes, that's it. Just what is seen through the lens, controlled by the aperture and shutter. For the most part, the majority of people won't really care too much about any of that stuff, but you're not taking professional quality photos using a smartphone compared to a real camera. Every time I use my iPhone, I've absolutely no idea what settings I'm shooting at, as it's all in auto mode. Maybe with an extra app, I can somehow control the camera settings. I do have the Filmic app, and I find that's quite good at times, but generally it's quite fiddly to use and not very accurate. And it's also more for video, not photos. Compare that to a real camera, I can change the settings so quickly and easily. On the R3 and R5 cameras, I have custom control set up, so I can change really quickly from shooting fast action sports at extreme shutter speeds to shooting at slower speeds in order to create motion blur effects. That's just one example. What about depth of field? I can change the aperture from f2.8 all the way to f22 if I wanted to. f2.8 gives me a shallow depth of field and nicely blurred out backgrounds, where f8 to f11 produces a greater depth of field where most of my scene will be in focus. Let's talk about autofocus. The iPhone has autofocus for simple scenes, but these Canon cameras have insanely fast and accurate autofocus settings. It's truly mind-blowing what these cameras are capable of doing. It's simply not possible to replicate this level of image capture with an iPhone 16 Pro Max, and very much doubt any Samsung phone would be any different. Obviously, the real benefit of having a good camera on a smartphone is the ability to edit and upload to social media or WhatsApp. With my Canon cameras, it's a little different, but also not that much slower. For example, for pro sports, I'm using a software program called Photo Mechanic. This allows me to transfer photos from my camera to the laptop and runs an automated process. It applies metadata, descriptions, renames and numbers the files, adds a watermark if necessary, allows me to edit the photos, places them into folders, and also uploads via FTP. This can literally be done within seconds of shooting an image. Have you ever wondered how professional sports shooters are able to get their photos out onto leading news channels and platforms such as BBC and Fox Sports, etc., within moments of something happening? This is what they're using. Of course, the same software and processes can be used to distribute photos onto social media. If you want to know more about how to shoot sports photography and the photomechanic workflow, please view this video here. So if you have the right setup and are super organized, you can distribute files from your camera to the web very quickly. Most mirrorless cameras also allow you to connect your smartphone via a free app. Canon has the Camera Connect app, which I use quite often. It allows me to connect wirelessly to the camera and to select the photos I want to transfer. Then I can apply my edit and upload to my social media channels. But the advantage I have is the fact that the photos from my camera are infinitely better quality than the ones taken with the smartphone camera. Another feature that almost all smartphones have built in, and it's something that's been around for a while now, is high dynamic range photography. This is why so many people, when they look at their photos on the screen, they think they've taken the most amazing pictures. It's all computational. The iPhone 16 by default is taking a set of HDR photos, realigning them and blending them together to create a high contrast image compared to a standard photo. But you know, real cameras have this feature as well, and it's way more advanced than you think. It's not all a time-consuming process of shooting and then editing the raw files. I am able to produce HDR imagery in camera using the multiple exposure option. I can also produce HDR imagery manually using the auto exposure bracketing option, and then edit the images together in Lightroom or Photoshop. That process is a lot longer, but I have far more control over how those images will look. When taking photos on the iPhone, most of those processes are done automatically. I have no actual control over anything. So that's why I generally use a real camera instead of an iPhone camera for when I'm doing commercial or professional work. So there we go, the iPhone 16 Pro Max, an absolutely fantastic piece of kit. And I'll be using it all the time for sure, but for non-professional and commercial work. Even now, with all the advancement in technology and all the new features that are packed into the iPhone, I would still use my R5 or R6 or R3 cameras for doing simple photography, because I know I'm getting far better quality. But for Apple and other smartphone manufacturers to claim that these devices have pro level cameras and lenses, for me is highly misleading. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and a share, and also subscribe for more videos.